Good morning, everybody. Welcome to a beautiful June morning for Morning Coffee Review. I'm joined here with Michael Achave. I'm Jason Artley, and we're here to talk about all things Bluebeam. Today is the first of our Espresso Yourself series, where we're going to be talking more about people who use Bluebeam than actually using Bluebeam and its products like review. So good morning, Michael. How's it going today?
Going good. I'm excited to start this new venture that we're going to allow folks to tell their story, a little bit about themselves and the journey they've encountered along the way to where they're currently at and in the industry. Today, we're going to be talking with ourselves. So Jason and myself are going to give a little bit more of our backgrounds, kind of talk openly with each other. Use this time in the chat as well to ask us questions. So if you do have any questions about things and challenges we've encountered along the way, feel free to use that moment. I do want to announce one of the great things about doing this more audio version is that it will be on Spotify, so you can listen to it later. We are not going to be live streaming these on the tube like we will be with our training outlines or training type of traditional MCR, I guess you would say. Do you agree?
Correct. If we can get inside the software, everything that we're going to have to describe is going to be more audio focused, but we're giving this a whirl, right?
We're trying out new things.
Yeah, exactly. And this whole idea stemmed from, we're all sort of interesting characters. We come from different backgrounds. We've worked on different things. We come from different, parts of the world. And right now, sort of a weird time in the job market. People are starting to think about, well, what if? What else could I do? And our goal is to inspire each other by telling our stories, right? You're seeing people switch back and forth between residential and commercial, and there's different aspects of construction, heck, even more on the administration side of things. So our goal is to interview and have conversations with, it's probably a better way to put it.
Yeah, I wouldn't say interview. That's a little too harsh. I'm more of the open conversation kind of person.
Yeah, we're going to have an open conversation and hopefully inspire some folks by talking to people who have an interesting background, because maybe that will lead you down a path to either think about, maybe I want to do that, or, hey, I know somebody like that too. And we're just trying to get to know each other better. You don't always have to listen to Michael and myself, but through these series, every other week of Espresso Yourself, we're going to have someone join us, and it's going to be a really good time. So by all means, ask the questions. We'll do our best to answer them as we always do. It'll just be in a little bit of a different format every other week.
Yeah. And if you want to join, feel free to, at the end, I don't know if this one's going to have a survey, but our traditional one does, or email us. If you'd like to join. Some of you have already reached out to us, and we are in the works with DJ CJ's in the works. So if you're listening in, we appreciate you, handling that for us, because it really is helpful. But those that want to join in and tell your story as you listen to these, if you're listening to this on Spotify as well, feel free to email us and join and talk with us, right? We want to help everyone learn your story and maybe have some other people join that kind of line of where you're at. Great.
Yeah. Exactly. So we hope you're sticking around for this part of our journey, and I'm seeing some questions rolling already. Thank you so much. We're going to have a good old time. And in the meantime, the next time that we do this so it'll be June 27th, we will have a guest. But for now, we're going to be
telling our story,
because we've told little bits and pieces here and there over the 2 years of over 2 years of Morning Coffee Review. But in the meantime, we're going to do our thing. So before we get started, I have a question for the community out there, because before we got started in the chat, Chris asked, does anybody use a Stream Deck for review? And since it's kind of a neat play on what we're doing today with this audio version of MCR, we're talking about streaming, right? And if you haven't seen a Stream Deck, mine's connected to my computer. I could probably
move it open.
There we go. I'm gonna I can't even unplug it. I was going to unplug it and show you, but it's a customizable dock that sits in front of your computer. And you see this a lot with people who are streaming games and things like that. They're really, really cool. You can do things in order to have it turn on lights. You can have it, run macros or open programs. It's highly customizable. Sound effects. So there's different sizes of them, and they're pretty neat. Michael and I both have them.
Yep.
And honestly, I don't use it that much. I have it set up to launch Review. I have it set up to launch Civil 3D. I have it set up to launch my Teams and also mute in my camera. But I don't use it as much as I probably should. How about you, Michael?
Yeah, they're macros. I do set mine up for things like Spotify, so stop, play, skip. And you can typically, what people use it for is for sound effects, right? So you're able to go through and you utilize it for macros, essentially, just tying any macro that you want to it. Ours is 6 buttons. I think there's also a double tap feature, but I just have the 6. So it's just like icons that you can program to it. They light up, cool colors. You can get them. They're pretty cheap on Amazon, I think. I'll look one up right now. But yeah, you can go and grab those and assign macros. It's kind of like an extension of having macros onto your mouse. But I'll look one up right now.
Yeah. So, oh, David, with the guitar pedal effect correlation. Yeah, it's very much like a guitar pedal effect, right? It plugs into your signal stream and you can just hit a button and it will do something different. It's also, if we got any old schoolers out there, it's like having an old digitizer for CAD, right? Where
if you get the larger ones, they're more expensive.
Yes. Yeah.
So the 15 key one, if you want 15 keys with macros, that one is $150. The 6 key one is $71. They have a 32 key one. So if you wanted a ton of macros, wow, there are a lot. I don't know if I can memorize that, but if you ever wanted to have 32 macros on a Stream Deck, you could. It's essentially like an extension of a keyboard, right? Because your keyboard is essentially macros, right? Just a list item of code that's just sending something to your processor, processing the information and putting it in as an output on your screen, right? Same thing.
But as desktops get more cluttered and as you're looking to add some efficiency to your day, these are pretty handy outside of the streamer web thing, for those macros and being able to find some things. But yeah, it's a cool tool. But as for Review, you could totally use it to do things that you wanted it to do, just like you can customize your hotkeys. Or I think last week we talked about setting up mouse buttons. You could have this do that, but I don't know if anybody's doing that. So that was a good question, Chris. Thanks for letting me think about that, because now my wheels are turning about how I can use this as a little, cheat code thing in Review. But as Michael and I have said before, not supposed to use hotkeys because it's really hard when we're presenting or training or something. If we get all hotkey heavy, people aren't going to know what button we clicked on or what action that we invoked. So it's been hard to slap ourselves on the wrist and prevent those old workflows that we did in other softwares. So, all right, good stuff. So today we have our conversational thing, and that's where things got a little weird. So, Tobin, you're here. Would you like to join us, or should we keep rolling? Glorified remote control. Going back to the Stream Deck.
Great. Tobin's ready.
All right, cool. You got it?
Yep.
So, and last minute pivot, as we normally do. You should know by now that when Michael and I are on the screen or coming through your ears, it's going to be a rabbit hole. So sometimes you got to follow along with us as we jump from here to here, because we're looking at chats and we do some sort of last minute pivoting. And today is one of those where we had scheduled Tobin, and we're going to let Tobin tell his story. But in the last minute of panic, I couldn't get a hold of him because we're busy. So we'll add yet another Clark to our list here. And you're muted, bud, but there we go. Good morning, Tobin. How's it going?
Hey, good morning. I'm doing well. How about you?
Doing good.
Good.
Yeah, are you
I don't know if
brothers?
David and I are related.
We might have to
Um,
fake it. Just might have to fake it.
Yeah, I have one younger brother. His name is not David though.
Oh, well, maybe
Wouldn't
they'll
that be crazy?
adopt you. Yeah.
There was a
good morning.
comment that I should donate some plants to you, Jason. Jason and I have had a long conversation about that, and
Yeah.
I would lose my plants if I donated them to Mr. Hartley.
Because I don't do so well. I did see. Rest in peace.
He has empty pots.
I've tried to. I went shopping. I went intentionally plant shopping on Sunday. I was at a maker's market, and they had some plants, and they were in the pet, safe zone. And I started looking at them like $20, $30, okay, $12, and I started like, well, that's not going to bring me a lot of joy because it's only going to live a week or two in my life. So I couldn't bring myself to do it. But we'll see, because it is good for me. It is. I do notice when my plants are thriving that that little air quality and stuff is nicer in my office. But anywho,
anyways, we'll pivot back. Let's introduce Tobin and start our first Espresso Yourself. Do you want to start out, Jason?
Yeah. So Tobin is a member of our civil team. So here at ATG, we kind of operate like a boutique AEC firm where we have a dedicated architectural department, a civil engineering and GIS department, MEP department, reality capture, and structural. And Tobin is a newer member to our civil team, and he comes from an interesting background, and we're here to learn more about you. You are one of the up-and-coming Bluebeam superstars here at ATG, and so we know you have some Bluebeam background, but we haven't had a good chance to hang out and chat with you, and why not just put you on the spot and just do it here. So we'll have some more civil content, but it's not an interview. We're just chatting. So tell us about yourself. What's your elevator pitch?
Yeah. So I started learning AutoCAD in high school. It was part of a academy program. And it was like they had a lot of opportunities to put you into like engineering paths, and you can get internships and things like that. And my internship was at an architecture firm for 2 days, and then the architecture firm just didn't have any work, and so they just said, "Don't come back. Sorry, we're not busy enough for you." And so that was kind of a dumpster fire. But that's the way. That's sometimes that's how
Was it a
is,
paid
an unpaid
internship?
internship. No,
Oh,
unfortunately.
okay.
Yeah.
I think the tide's starting to change for paid internship in terms of not being free work, right? And it being at least paid for work. Because there is time, you are gaining experience. It's kind of like a catch-22, right? Because I think the thought process between internship was you're getting the experience, that is your payment for the internship. But I feel as if that's finally starting to change, where it is some type of amount to be an internship, but you're also gaining experience, right? So
Yeah, they're going to have to do that because interns they provide vital services to a firm, and people don't. Making money is kind of an okay thing. So there we go. Doug's saying that inside of BC and Canada, it's unpaid internship is probably illegal. So
that that unpaid internship, it wasn't for 2 days, it wasn't so bad, but yeah, I would have liked to be paid. The school did do paid internships, and next year the teacher who set me up with an internship felt bad and kind of like gave me an in at another company that did pay me. So next year I was doing GIS, AutoCAD Map 3D, and and a little bit of Civil 3D. I was the best person there at Civil 3D, and so I was teaching everybody there how to use Civil 3D. And I guess that's what kind of got me on this civil instructor path. I
So
came
when you
back
for
to
for school, did you so this was still before college, right?
before college. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Just tracking.
Yeah, and I came back and I was actually teaching the kids in my class. I was teaching the kids in my class how to use Civil 3D. So it's kind of funny.
Is that where you
And
felt like you had a passion for teaching, was kind of that early
mhm,
high school days?
yeah, actually, late
Okay.
high school days at that point, but yeah.
Late high school days. Apologies.
That was my senior year. Yeah. And I came back for the next couple of years and I would teach a Civil 3D course for like a week, which was fun. I didn't know Civil 3D nearly as well as I do now, but I was like, here's an alignment, here's a corridor. We're gonna make some a proposed profile and calculate some cut fills and you know all the fun ways to automate things. But after that, I posted my resume. I got some jobs, and I was working for. Can I say the company names? Yeah.
If you
It's up to
want
you.
to,
Yeah, it's not
I mean, I'm not
not
gonna.
on us.
Okay, I won't speak disparagingly of anybody. Everybody's
there we
great.
go.
Uh, and so
Everyone's great.
yeah. After that, I started working for um, the first job. The first like time I was using Bluebeam. I'll just say I was working at Haskell. It's one of our.
I've heard of them.
Yeah, they do a lot of food and beverage design here in
Okay.
Jacksonville, and we were using Bluebeam there. I was doing redline markups as a low-level drafter, you might imagine, and so I would
So no pen and
receive.
paper by then. It was
No,
just through review. Okay.
yeah, and I would have my markups on one screen, and I would be, completing my markups on the other screen and making changes and using the highlighter tool. And that's how I started. And then gradually I would, need to shrink PDFs. That was a common one. I would need to compare PDFs between my changes, and I would see my boss doing a lot more complex things and showing me how to do some things that were a little more time intensive that he wanted me to do instead.
So this is fascinating that you started with the PDF markup and the whole digital red line instead of dealing with all of the madness that comes from the paper and the printing
Paper.
and the paper cuts and all that
11 by
back and forth.
17s.
There
all
were
of the
some
highlighters.
So my first paid internship doing GIS, there were some red line markups on paper, but
Okay.
at Haskell there was digital markups.
That's fascinating. This reminds me of last week when I was in Little Rock doing our onboarding and training some of the new folks that had joined our company. And welcome aboard, George. Since you're here, I thought that it was interesting when I was talking about Autodesk InfraWorks and how designing in 3D and how that is going to be very relative for some folks who grew up playing Roblox and playing Minecraft and using Google Earth, right? Because kids, and as they start using computers as they grow, this is going to be more familiar to them than drawing in 2D because they didn't have to do that AutoCAD stuff. They're going to jump right to the 3D world. So for you, Tobin, to jump, a little bit of paper in there, but for the most part, you're jumping straight to a digital experience when it comes with coordinating these red lines. That's fascinating.
I mean, it's also like the same for using Vellum, right? And transfer paper. If you think of it that far back when we didn't have AutoCAD, and we're drawing out our sets and using erasers and the big drafting rooms.
Yep. Ink on Mylar, Vellum. Yeah. All those old terms that are just slowly fading away.
There was still a drafting table in my first internship office. I was like, what is that thing?
No. Yeah, someone asked if I didn't have AutoCAD. Yeah, I wasn't of the era of using Vellum or anything like that. So don't worry, David. Even though my age shows up top, it definitely not part of that era.
And now there's that trace command in AutoCAD 2023 and 24, and that is a lot like that Vellum interface. You have like putting your markups on top of things, and yeah, that's a really cool thing to show off. And in 2024, it's a lot better, a lot better.
Speaking of that, you just hosted a webinar on what's new in Civil 3D 2024 a couple weeks ago, and I got to watch it the other day while I was doing some other stuff. And man, you crushed that thing. There's some things in that new tool that I didn't know. So if you are listening and you're a civil person and you're wanting to know what's new on Civil 3D 2024, check out the atgusa.com YouTube page and go find our one that what's new in Civil 3D 2024. Tobin here did a great demonstration on some of those new things, including that trace command that he just mentioned.
Yeah,
But,
if you're doing markups, it's a game changer.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's where we're going to start to see more of this digital markup thing is starting to spread, right? It's not just Bluebeam Review. It's happening inside of AutoCAD and other verticals and things like that. But, you know, we're here all about talking, I know, how you got to Bluebeam. So this is an interesting start that I didn't see coming. So this is good for me. But seeing the chat, you know, other folks have had experience with having to refill the ink on the pen plotter. Like, I mean, those were painful days, and I do remember that stuff. Working on Vellum, drawing on Mylar with pens, doing the as builds, and you know, I've got a lot of manual drafting experience, but it can stay in the past as far as I'm concerned.
It definitely was a beneficial change, I feel, with updates and how we're moving in the direction. And you can see the evolution. I know our industry takes a lot longer to adopt new technology, but we're finally at that transitional phase of hopefully at some point. I know there's still folks, right, that still use printout paper and ink for all of their items, but I think we're finally at that transition where you're noticing the full shift of using this digital PDF as part of this BIM workflow, right? It's going to be a staple, hopefully soon, where you know there's no longer the need to print and use markups in that manner.
Yeah, speaking of printing, we're talking about blueprints, and I remember running the Diazo machine to convert, you know, paper drawings into blueprint drawings, and we're talking about you know, having the need to do that. If we think about how far this technology has come, and we're only talking what 30 years ago. I'm stealing your number there, Doug, but between 30 years, we've gone from these complicated processes of drawing on paper, turning them into blueprints, and just cranking out tons and tons of expensive, smelly paper, to now a portable document.
Yeah, and people don't usually notice
anywhere.
Yeah, and people don't usually notice the cost associated to it, right? Like we were talking about the cost for the software solution, but the cost alone for plants, right? Cutting down trees and the items to create the paper, but also the cost for ink and what's associated with the impact that ink does as well, right? So as we're thinking about all of the transition to this digital world and how we can make a more efficient process, but along the same vein, right, as we're saving money in the end too. So
yeah, we would do like 6-7 rounds of markups before an issue, and every time you're printing on 50 pages on 11 by 17. Ooh,
when I was doing when I was working at Arcadia Custom for windows and doors, we were printing out 11 by 17s all the time and redlining, and there was times where you made a mistake before and you already had printed it, and you would just trash the whole set and just reprint it because you fixed it. Ridiculous.
I mean, that was trashing it because we weren't even recycling at that point.
Yeah, weren't even recycling. Yeah.
But
yeah, and you print with the wrong page setup, and it's all lost.
Wrong title block or something, and you're just like, oh well, let me just go and dump that and go print out a whole new set.
Yeah. So wasteful. In hindsight, we probably could have saved some forests. But you know, it is what it is. Everything needs to evolve, and I'm glad that we're going in the right direction. But I am a little nostalgic sometimes when I see, you know, a 36-inch roll of paper getting loaded into a giant, large format machine. But I'm glad that I don't have to be the one changing paper anymore, throwing out my back, all that stuff. But it's some really It's fascinating.
Yeah, those big reams of paper are like 20 pounds and they're bulky.
Yeah.
Oh, they're more than that. But they're heavy, they're big, and they're awkward. And you'd always run to that thing where, hey, we got a deadline on Friday, we're printing, and like, oh, who took the last roll of paper? We're out. And then that delays everything, or you're out of ink. It's just PDFs
Oh,
and using review have really made life easier.
and I would drive. I was like the paper boy. I would drive the printed plans to the different municipalities. I would drive 2 hours here, 2 hours back, and yeah.
That was one of
That
my
was cool.
first jobs as well, working as a runner for an architectural firm while I was going to school. And I would go drop them off here, go drop them off there, go pick up these supplies, go put these in storage. It's an interesting thing, and that's how I got kind of started with my architectural roots, is because that was the route I wanted to go down. But I don't miss those days driving around Phoenix in a car with no AC. Just being young and dumb and whatever else.
There's a lot of comments in the chat about costs and, the old process of using printed out papers, and just being aware of, how far the industry has come from. What did David say? Or it was Doug that said 30 years, right? Yeah.
Yeah. David just said something in the chat that's just blowing my mind right now. And I totally see this happening, but I'm so thankful this wasn't me. They used to screenshot the plans from AutoCAD or whatever, design software you're using, do a screenshot, paste that screenshot inside of Excel, and use the drawing tools to highlight. Oh boy. And if you know how much me and Excel don't get along, this is like nightmare fuel. So, I mean, at least use Paint, for crying out loud. MS Paint could have done a good job, but I'm glad we didn't have to do that. And
Man.
David says he remembers making 10 sets of paper submittals with carbon transfer paper and then rushing to FedEx pickup. Oh man, I just flashbacks, PTSD from that.
So after getting that job, what happened from there? And using review kind of not at its full capacity, what did you start going and doing from there? Did you start learning more review after that job, or did you transition somewhere else?
Yeah, I transitioned I was basically doing red lines the whole time I was there. I got another job where I was using another PDF markup software, and I wasn't.
What was it?
Adobe.
Okay. So you were using Adobe Acrobat, DC Pro or just DC?
DC Pro, and
okay.
I mean, it was kind of like the similar workflows. I know I'm using the enemy, but is there like a drinking game?
There is.
Yes. Whenever you say Adobe. Oops.
Okay.
Well, it's too early for that.
Yeah,
but,
it's coffee.
So be careful when you are in the room with the other two of us and you say that word. There's usually repercussions. So fair warning.
Jason carries a backpack full of Fireball.
That would be Matt Lynn.
That's true.
But that's all right. I've since moved on.
So you were using Adobe, and then from there, how comparable at that time when you were in industry were the two softwares?
They were comparable. I thought Bluebeam seemed like everything was a bit easier to find for me, but I think that's because I got started in Bluebeam. I mean, I think I could have, had I started in Adobe, I would have found Adobe easier to find all the tools. But it was the same pretty much the same workflow. I found the transition to be good, although one of the engineers was using Bluebeam, and so they had the IT guy bought him Bluebeam, and everybody else was on Adobe because that was like the default for the company. That was kind of interesting. And then let's see. Eventually, I was like on the other side of the equation. We had some interns, and I was doing the markups for them, and that was interesting. I was kind of sending them digital markups just as the engineers did before.
Okay, and for that, is that, do you now where your knowledge is at, I guess we'll get there, but right, using review in Adobe, the same mentality of just not efficiently, right? So I'm assuming at some point you'll shed some light on how you gained efficiency by actually understanding how review works versus using, we call it using it like Adobe, which is, just a comment with an arrow and then some text, right? Where you're using 3 different commands to complete a single task that you would in review. And, we speak to that all the time about the efficiency, but for those folks that are maybe newer to review listening in, about those kind of workflows, right?
Yeah. On the Adobe side, I was doing the text markups. I try to avoid using arrows. I would just stick text on top of things, and it wasn't pretty, but that was the way I did it. Unless I really felt like the area was cluttered and I wanted to use an arrow. But that text with arrow option for Bluebeam is really great. That doesn't. Yeah, if I had questions about how to do something in Adobe, I would just ask somebody.
Okay.
There's other engineers there to give. I wasn't an engineer. I say other engineers as if I'm, but there were other people doing markups, and so I would just ask them for answers to my questions. Combining sheets, I found that to be like really difficult in Adobe. I would always go to the pages panel, and I would just drag PDFs into that panel. Because I would do a lot of combining. We would have our PDF printouts be single sheets, so 1 sheet per file, single sheet files. And at some point you'd have to combine those, and I would do a lot of that. I would use the staple in Adobe, but in a sorry, the staple program that comes with the Adobe with the Bluebeam software, and I would combine the PDFs into everything into one file
Versus having the software open and trying to combine and drag.
Yeah, that actually, we had a question a couple weeks ago about like everybody thinks that Bluebeam Review is just for markups, just for red lines, and they don't know that it can do all those document, putting them together and rotating pages and putting them in order and organizing. And that part sort of gets lost when we're talking about review. It's far more powerful than people give it credit for. So there's some talking about some things in the chat, like, can we do dimensions? Or is it just a markup tool? We can absolutely use it to draw, to add dimensions, to measure, to do some quantity takeoffs. And as we continue down this Espresso Yourself series, you're going to learn what some pretty unique people are doing with this software that go far beyond what you would even see on the Bluebeam website, right? Because they're just going to give you the highlights to get you to buy the software. But when it comes to actually using it, what makes it so sort of compelling is like it's a simple PDF software, right? But we're taking it and we're doing things with it that most people aren't thinking about. So as we continue down this series, it's going to be fascinating to see, how folks like Tobin, how they get started using it and doing different things and having to kind of figure out to make it work for you. So,
and I'm pretty sure we'll hear the path similar to some folks, in the industry, how they started out using Adobe, or they transitioned like Tobin did from both, right? And what was those and what things did they encounter? How did they make them relatable? And then, probably at the end, why they made the switch and advocated for this as a solution, right? So after using Adobe and working and doing some of those engineering markups, where else did you go?
Yeah. I moved to a couple different companies. I jumped around different positions. I did some remote work where I would.
Did you have a rule when you were jumping around of how long you would stay at a company?
I was with companies for about like a year at a time.
Okay.
I didn't have. I wouldn't call it a rule. It's just some other opportunity would seem more agreeable to me, and I would do that.
Did you have a rule, Jason?
I think that's more common. I think with us on the civil path, that like, hey, there was so much demand that you can just go to the company across the street for $1 an hour, and that's good enough rule, right?
Oh,
If
okay.
I can make more than $1 an hour increase, sure, whatever. Loyalty isn't as much of a thing when you're young, whereas like on the architectural side, I feel like, oh, you worked 10 years under this architect. I think that means more than like, hey, I was cranking out plans for sewer pipes and nobody cares.
Yeah,
So I don't think it's a stain.
my rule was kind of like 2 years of experience at somewhere before, because I feel like that's where some parts of the industry, not all, of course, right? Some parts of the industry, in order to move forward, you would have had to move.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I was trying to, I felt like I was moving forward into these different positions as a slightly more responsibility on a blank slate rather than starting from the bottom and pulling up.
Exactly. It's kind of an interesting thing how we end up where we end up, right? And
Yeah.
those little choices that you make. I mean, all aspects of life, but especially when we come to being in the design space.
Yeah, I would agree.
So my longest stint and where I kind of was serving as like CAD manager was at Stellar. Stellar is a similar food and beverage company, and I had the pen tables printed out on my wall there, and I was in charge of updating templates, making sure the styles in Civil 3D were matching correctly to what they were printing out and things like that. And that was a big change. We had interns there too, and I was doing markups, and they were in charge of updating the AutoCAD blocks. And so
so there's that transition, right? When you were in school, you were the one doing them, and then now at this point, how long did it take for you to be in that position of now handing out red lines to the new interns?
I was in school. Sorry, I've been in the industry like 8 years total, and
at what year were you CAD manager intern?
okay, the
what
distance
space of
there.
time?
Yeah, that was not very long. That was like 4 or 5 years.
Okay.
That's a crazy ramp up. I mean, that's awesome, because usually that's something that takes 15, 20 years, right? But depends on the size of firm and how things go in. But depending on that mindset that you show, it's kind of makes some companies just, yep, that's the person for that.
Yep.
Very cool.
At all the and I would move to like teach, and I was teaching at Civil 3D at a lot of these companies. It was the 2010s, and so not very few people knew Civil 3D. So
have you always been in Florida?
Yeah, I've always basically lived here my whole life.
Okay. Interesting. We got a lot of Florida folks joining the ATG team, and we're hearing more of that state. Michael's over there in Arizona. I'm up here in Minnesota, but we've got people across the country. So getting more Florida folks is just going to wreak havoc with my calendar and keeping track of time zones. But that's all right.
Time zones.
All right.
So after the CAD management position, were you using Review at that point?
I was using Review in the CAD management position.
How was your depth
I had
of
Adobe
knowledge?
and Review. They just bought both the softwares for us. I felt like I was in a position where I can Google anything I needed. I don't know about depth of knowledge.
So were you more self-learning at this point?
Yeah, there
still
was
with
never
Review?
any training for me, and there was never we never had like a Bluebeam training course internally. I would teach a lot of Civil 3D training courses because I would make updates to the template, and then in that process, I'd be like, "Well, we're on the room. Let me show you guys. Make sure you're doing this correctly."
With your knowledge at this point, and we probably won't get there with the time that we have left, but at where you're at knowledge-wise, but knowing as much as you do now, do you think it would have benefited you having some personalized training instead of having to Google things?
Yeah. I mean, I would definitely do things the wrong way, and now I know that that there's a better way. I would I can't. Yeah, I mean, I would sometimes catch myself making like arrows and leaders, arrows and text separately. I would have two PDFs open and just like visually comparing them when I could use the compare tool, like all these tools that are built into Bluebeam. I just didn't know were there. And so yeah, I remember I was trying to draw a dashed line and I would draw line segments manually.
Oh boy. Yeah.
There's all kinds of there's all kinds of silly things that we do.
I've seen that done, and that actually ties well to a conversation that's happening in the chat right now about not understanding designers' layer naming conventions. So, building templates and understanding layer names and all that is a pretty important thing. So my question to you is, how do you feel about the NCS layer naming convention, the National CAD standard? Good, evil? I think there's no in between.
There's actually a
Because
lot of bend to it. Yeah, you can use I think it's the a suffix prefix for like anything that's kind of random. And then you could have the suffix is the last four characters be anything you want. You bend it a little bit, but I liked it. I think it's better than anything goes. It is kind of a middle ground if you understand the rules. In my opinion, I like it.
yeah, it's good to have something to guide you, because some of our folks who are joining us here, they're not really in the design space. They're dealing with after the fact, right? They're estimators and stuff. So seeing those layers and like, what the heck is all this, can get confusing. So what we need to do as designers is make sure that it's understanding.
There was a question about, did you have good mentors or any to fall back onto?
I still am in touch with that high school teacher.
Okay.
And so there's actually still actually teach Civil 3D and AutoCAD there. Now there's the internship program has expanded. They're expanding into other schools, and so I am tangentially involved in that.
Great. So kind of giving back from what was given to you.
Different engineers were great mentors. Really, stand up guys and females, women, and the they were, yeah, I'm just trying to think, different. Yeah, I mean, everybody in the industry was really great.
So did you feel the urge? So when I was in industry and now where I'm at currently, right, I feel the urge to give back because so much was given to me. Did you feel that same type of urge after what was given to you, kind of in that high school moment of helping you get into the industry? Do you feel like that same kind of, I don't know, calling, I guess, per se?
Wow,
I do.
that's heavy. That's heavy. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. This is a good topic. I do. I mean, I use my volunteer time and I go teach there. During during work hours, I guess.
Well, yeah, because we have volunteer hours here at A2G that you're allowed to use. Yeah.
Yeah, and so I'll go teach the kids there about Civil 3D, some processes, some guidance, some mentoring. I think I still mentor kids nowadays, and I encourage them to go down the civil path, and I think that they have some, there's need for more drafters, and so I'm trying to encourage that.
All right.
Yeah,
That's
because I
perfect.
feel,
Hang on. Hang
yeah.
on here. I'm
Okay.
fired up
Okay.
now.
All right.
We were talking about this, about the civil space. Like, how do we encourage more people to do civil stuff? And normally it's like, well, my brother or my uncle or my dad or somebody was a civil engineer and I'm just going to follow in their footsteps. But there's not a whole lot of people who grew up saying, man, I really want to design sewer pipes. That sounds great. You just kind of end up there. So having folks like you, Tobin, who go back and mentor to bring more, because there is a little bit of a shortage, right? All of the clients that we talk to, everybody's looking for civil people, because they're not just growing organically, and having folks like you mentor them is a key part to keeping this profession alive.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, so my introduction was just in terms of that calling, right? I've felt that and I embrace that, especially with being on the board for where I went to college, just because, right, that for some folks it's that reciprocation, right? We were given so much to be where we're currently at, and that calling to also give back to help other people be in this industry and succeed. I think that's something that some folks may miss, but not all, right? Um, and that's why it works out for what we're doing in the consulting part of the industry, right? Giving back to other firms and helping them succeed, or other folks and training them. It's definitely fit my itch for giving back, but also giving back to our grassroots, right? Where it all started. And that's something really cool that you're still doing that today and going back and, helping mentor, showing them different options of where they can go in the industry, and like, hey, this is where you can get to, or options of where you can get to, and help sharing that experience, because that's what's valuable, right? What things did you encounter? What trepidations did you have? What are the kind of failures you had to hopefully not have them have the same failures and kind of go through it. But failures are also great, right? Because it teaches you a lesson
Mhm.
along that way.
Yeah, I did a lot of mostly what I do is kind of just my story. I just talk about, how I got to where I am, and I'll talk about the switch to working in an office. Before working in an office, I was, working in a restaurant, and kind of was confident I was confident that the that the switch would be so easy, but it was really difficult to kind of slow down, and I was working in the kitchen and everything is fast, 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 and the quality it can be mediocre. But with engineering plans, it's right or it's wrong, and oh man, that was difficult to accept.
Yeah, I think one of the difficult parts for me to accept in the industry was like the red lines critique at the beginning. I think it becomes easier in the industry because you're getting so many corrections, right? Or red lines to make. I think that's the first breakthrough is criticism and critiquing that we come accustomed to, and it's acceptable versus, right, kind of outside the industry. When you're critiqued, it's because something's unacceptable.
Mhm.
So, but yeah, fast paced, definitely a transition from being in the restaurant into what we're doing now. Um, and so when you were doing restaurant work, what was that still in high school?
Yeah, I worked since I was 16
Okay.
in restaurant jobs.
Before you went into the
Before,
AEC.
yeah, I
Okay.
was doing that for like 3 years. Um, and yeah, and then I never went back, but
Do you still
uh,
cook at home?
yeah, I cook all the time at home.
Okay.
Yeah, I make pasta and potatoes and stuff.
Pasta from scratch?
Oh
Ooh,
no, sorry.
Okay.
I think that's one of
Box
those things
pasta.
like, well, if some people who worked in a restaurant, like, hey, I worked here, I will never eat that food again. Like, it, so
It
it's
was like the
interesting.
same. No, yeah, it's
Yeah.
the same for me when I used to work at a climbing facility. And I never enjoyed going out and climbing. It definitely took my passion out of the hobby, because I was working at a climbing facility versus doing it out of a hobby, right? So I could see that.
So if you started working in restaurant stuff when you were 16, let me see, let's say 14-year-old Tobin, what did 14-year-old Tobin think that he was going to grow up to be?
What I think I
When
was
you
gonna
were
get.
like a kid and you're growing up, like, I'm going to be a fireman or I'm going to be an astronaut. Like, did you have an idea of where you thought you would end up? And did you ever think you'd end up where you are?
I thought I would be something to do with math. I was always really good at math. And so maybe a like mathematics degree or engineering degree. I liked it. I just wasn't. Uh, I thought it was like kind of boring, but and then
That's fair.
I feel like the classes were a little slow for me, and so that was my engagement with math. I don't know. I know I didn't want to work in the restaurant industry. I know I didn't want to work in the Navy. That's where my dad worked.
Okay.
He was a lawyer in the Navy.
Okay.
Fascinating.
So at the point where you are now, I guess we have about 9 minutes left. Let's talk about fast forward to where you're at now. Transitioning from being industry, because we still are in industry, but on, I would say, the other side of consulting. How was that jump? What kind of trepidations did you have before coming over to the consulting part of the industry versus being in the industry? That's kind of like counterintuitive. How would you state it? Like, that's typically how I say it, being in the industry or consulting for the industry.
Yeah, I thought I thought this job would be a little bit more, um, I thought it'd be different. I thought there would be a lot more deadlines. There are, but it's mostly like a management, like you're just managing your calendar a lot.
The time
And
management part is tough.
yeah, the time management is totally different. I've never managed my time to this extent. Uh, and yeah, there's lots of, it's just, I think it's kind of interspersed. I think the work is is it's a lot more talking, you know. Before I would talk for like an hour and that's it. Now I'm talking for like 8 hours at a time. And yeah. I never had a sore throat from talking before. So luckily I always kind of enjoyed talking, but it's just something that is different.
There's definitely a learning curve to the mental fatigue I've felt when I first started on the consulting part of the industry, where you're teaching for 8 hours straight in Revit, which we no longer do, as we found out, right? Adult learning and having an understanding that sitting in 8 hours, you're not going to retain the information versus separate hour blocks. But I think that, right, that transition of mental fatigue is a little bit different because you don't realize how you're. It was always boggled me because I'd be like, how did my professors talk all day for classes? Because I'm fatigued mentally versus, like a physical fatigue, which I was used to from climbing all the time, running, riding bikes or something, right? In comparison to here. So that's enlightening to think of that too.
Yeah, so we're talking in the chat about, still trying to figure out what we want to be when we grow up. I think it's a unique feeling. And we'll always circle back in 5 years, and it'd be nice to see how we all grow. But we started jumping off this morning when we went straight to how you got into Bluebeam, Tobin, but without getting too heavy into my office space love and throwing out office space quotes, what is it you say that you do here? Like, so if we're talking about managing time, if somebody wants some of Tobin's time, what do you spend your time doing here at ATG?
So I'm a civil technical specialist. I will teach classes. I'll do tech demos and explain to other people how to use some software, or explain, why they ought to use if they're not using a software, why they ought to in the future. And I'll do a little bit of drafting. I'll help it fill in some gaps that people need in their design teams. If somebody needs some cross-section sheets made, I'll do that. And I teach myself so I can continue to teach others. So I think that's what I'm doing.
So you actually get time here to do professional development internally too for yourself, right?
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yep. Great.
That's really beneficial. Yeah, that's another thing I'm not used to doing. I'm not used to this lifelong learning. I mean, I do it in my own time, but it's like I'm being paid to be a lifelong learner, which is really great. I think it encourages a good mindset for you to continue to do it. It's not like outside of work, I think.
Yeah, because I think with being in the industry, right, it's deadline centric, like you just talked about, right? There's deadlines, so there's not enough time to learn where the industry is going and what technology can help us move that needle, right, from a business perspective. But fortunately, on the consulting end, right, there's time to do that where you're reinvesting in yourself and where the industry is able to go and learning that new technology and how it can not just benefit you, but also the industry and people you're talking to, right?
And speaking of adult learning, in a couple weeks or next month, I believe we're going to have Scott Koenig from Bluebeam join us, and he's one of the folks that led Michael and I on the instructor path, and we're going to have some great conversations about, adult learning and how adults learn, because I guarantee you're going to have a light bulb moment when we've got that going on, because even in hindsight, just like what you mentioned, Tobin, like figuring out how we work, that's not common knowledge. It's not something that you learn just by Googling it. You kind of have to figure out how people learn, and everybody's a little different, and it's really it's an art form to understand it.
It's like I'm starting at a different company every single day.
But that's a solid way to put it. And
Yeah.
it's not a bad thing, right? It's a good challenge, because that monotony that we got in the industry that leaves you to change firms or whatever, that's completely off the table, right? Now it's like every day is a choose your own adventure.
Yep.
And if you can, if you've got the mindset for it, man, it's so rewarding.
Yeah, I would say one thing that this job reiterates almost every day is self-discipline, right? Being able to understand where you need to get to and what things you need to learn along the way. But it encourages that growth internally too.
Absolutely. So I'm getting caught up on the chat here. Got some interesting conversation about, sorry, you're going to have to explain this to me, fellas. Congrats to City. So something in the UK, I'm guessing it's soccer related or football related. And then talking about mental fatigue. Yes, that's terrible. David backing me up with the Office Space quote of "I'm a people person." But it is really an interesting world that we've got out here, and as we see in the chat, people from around the country are having good conversations, and we look to continue the series with having more folks like you, Tobin, and more folks who we don't even know yet join us here on Espresso Yourself, so we can learn. Tobin, one of my biggest takeaways from talking to you this morning is how you feel compelled to be a mentor. Right, you're going back and you're mentoring. You're going back to where your roots were, to help guide other kids and other people, to give them sort of guidance. And I think that's so commendable. And I really am excited to learn that about you today.
Yeah,
I agree. I think it was awesome to learn more about what you have done and how you're willingness to give back to the industry and help mentor those folks that are trying to venture into here. And we appreciate you jumping on for the first Espresso Yourself. And we look forward, anyone listening in and here or on Spotify that would love to join us, feel free to email us here at ATG. You can email marketing@ATGUSA. For those folks that aren't here live on Zoom, I put the email in the chat. I will scroll back up and grab that email again. If you would like to tell your story and just have a conversation with Jason and me. Heck, you can even ask us questions along the way if you want to learn more about us too. Anything else, Mr. Artley? Anything else?
We've got a solid guest list coming up. Tobin, thanks for being the first one on our series, but we've got quite the list going. And as we start doing this, we'd love to have more people join us. That way we get it all organized, and it'll be on Spotify. Now, we got 1 minute left, Michael. What the heck is Spotify?
Okay, so I push this endeavor since I love listening on Spotify to other podcasts. So Spotify is an audio platform. Well, you can still put videos on there, but our intention was to have an audio platform that you can re-listen to these at your leisure. So if you do want to check us out, we will get this all ironed out from us internally and post a link at some point, but you will be able to check us out on Spotify and re-listen to this. Share it, right, for some knowledge, maybe to some folks that are trying to enter in the industry or looking for a change and want to learn more about other folks' mountains and hills they had to climb to get where they're currently at and what positions they're at. And maybe they want to be in those same positions and what things you went to counter and to conquer to get to those points. As I'm trying to think of how I would structure that. and be in the industry, right? And how we're moving the needle forward. But other than that, you want to wrap it up, Mr. Arley?
That's it. So thank you for joining us today, Tobin. Thanks for your time. Thanks everybody for listening to us and you know, giving us some leeway to be experimental today. We will see you next week for a more technical presentation as we normally do. Other than that, we'll see you next week. Stay safe.
Stay safe, everyone.
Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.